Tonight, it's Monday. We just had a vacation, so we're trying to think a little more broadly about what's happening in this world. Here's what we've come up with. If you had to boil down the Democratic Party's long-term goals to the most important goals, the first would be this, and it's obvious. The federal government ought to cover the essentials of life for most people. Health care, college, housing, food, in some cases a guaranteed basic income. That's the program the Democrats espouse. Another word for it might be socialism. The party's other long-term goal is the elimination of meaningful restrictions on immigration into this country. Get rid of ICE, accept most refugees, give citizenship to tens of millions of people here illegally. In other words, open borders. So those are the Democrats' main priorities, a massive social welfare state and millions of new citizens from the third world. Nobody is hiding that. We're not making it up. They're saying it out loud. The problem is that those two goals conflict with each other. You can either admit the world's poor into your country, or you can give your own people more free stuff, but you can't do both. The math doesn't work. Socialism with open borders is impossible. It has never worked, and it never will work. Anyone who thinks about that for about a minute understands it. So the idea is fatally flawed. The question is, how do you sell a program that can never actually work? Well, you lie about it. You pretend that what's obviously true isn't true at all, and you're evil for thinking otherwise. And of course, that's exactly what they're doing now. Watch DNC spokesman Jim Acosta from earlier this month scold the president for daring to suggest that migrants from the imaginary caravan, should it actually exist, might try to hop the U.S. border.
But your campaign had an ad showing migrants climbing over walls and so on.
Well, that's true.
But
they weren't actors.
They're not going to be doing that.
They weren't actors. Well, no, it's true. Do you think they were actors? They weren't actors. They didn't come from Hollywood.
All right.
They're not going to be doing that, says Democratic flack Jim Acosta. Turns out that's precisely what they're going to be doing, and just did over the weekend. American authorities had to shut down the border crossing at San Ysidro, California, right next to San Diego, after about 1,000 people tried to rush the crossing. Watch. So that's what the DNC channels told us was never going to happen. And of course, it did happen, and it was bad. Mexican riot police and U.S. border agents both came under attack from the mob, which threw rocks at them. With no meaningful wall along the borders, authorities used tear gas to disperse the crowd. Now, there's fairly recent precedent for doing that. In 2013, a group of about 100 people tried to rush the very same border crossing at San Ysidro. American authorities forced them back with pepper spray. Barack Obama was president at the time, and the incident passed with little notice. Just 5 years later, there's a new president and an entirely different standard. The left erupted at these pictures of the tear gas and accused the administration of moral atrocities. Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz got so worked up, he suggested that American authorities had committed a war crime by using illegal chemical weapons. Keep in mind, these same so-called chemical weapons are used against unruly American citizens all the time, and nobody cares. But those weren't American citizens you just saw getting tear gassed over the weekend. They were migrants. They were holy men on a sacred pilgrimage north. What happened to them was inexcusable. Cue the moral outrage.
Here we look at children being subjected to tear gas. That's the United States causing that. That's outrageous.
We have seen the images of the children and the women, and there has got to be a pragmatic and compassionate answer here that does not involve tear gassing children. That is not who America is.
That's not what America is, declares some random blowhard on CNN who has somehow been deputized to lecture you about what America is. On the left, America is always one thing for sure, in every case, wrong. Watch as this MSNBC guest suggests that federal Border Patrol agents must have been lying about being attacked with rocks.
There's also questions whether or not anyone actually threw rocks yesterday. NPR was reporting that actually it was relatively peaceful.
Yep, relatively peaceful, except for this scene, which somehow didn't make it into many news reports. So, well, yes, it turns out they were, in fact, throwing rocks, but according to a lot of the analysis you may have seen today, it was in a peaceful way. gentle rock throwing, really more tossing than throwing, playful, actually. Now, here's a different perspective. This is from someone who was actually there in San Ysidro, and in contrast to the people you just saw, is not a professional propagandist.
I kind of challenged that this was a peaceful protest, or that the majority of these people were claiming asylum. We ended up making about 42 arrests. Only 8 of those were females, and there were only a few children involved. The vast majority of the people we're dealing with are adult males. One of the groups that I watched, one of the groups that actually several of them were arrested, they passed 10 or 15 marked Border Patrol units walking east to west, or west to east, I'm sorry. Numerous uniformed personnel as they were chanting, waving a Honduran flag, and throwing rocks at the agents. If they were truly asylum seekers, they would have just walked up with their hands up and surrendered, and that did not take place. What I find unconscionable is that people would intentionally take children into this situation. What we saw over and over yesterday was that the group, the caravan as we call them, would push women and children towards the front and then begin basically rocking our agents.
So there you have it. We'll let you reach your own conclusions about who is telling the truth about what's happening right now on our southern border. Check the video before you make up your mind. But as you ponder it, step back and ask yourself some more fundamental questions. Is there a natural limit to this kind of immigration? How many resources does America really have to share with the rest of the world? Are we as rich as we assume we are? Are you? How many poor people can we realistically accept before we're not that rich at all, but increasingly resemble the countries from which these people are fleeing? And by the way, if accepting more poor people really makes you more prosperous, then what exactly has happened in California over the past 30 years, which despite record levels of immigration is poorer than ever? Now, it's possible there are good answers to these questions, logical answers. On the other hand, if there are answers, why is the left trying to prevent you from asking the questions? David Tafuri is a lawyer and former Obama campaign advisor who joins us today. David, thanks a lot for coming on. So before we get to the broader questions about where the country's going and what we can absorb, a few questions about what happened over the weekend. I've watched all day as Americans have defended foreign citizens who attacked American border agents and suggested that somehow the Americans are in the wrong when foreigners waving foreign flags throw rocks at them. How does that work?
Well, you showed some compelling footage, and I think both sides of this debate need to take a deep breath and think about their positions. So I agree with you, remember, that we have the right to control our border and decide who gets in. On the other side, we also have to use rule of law when we process people who do have the right to apply for political asylum under the laws of our country and have the right to do that and while being in a peaceful place and not under the economic and serious security situation that they face in Honduras. And now there's a compromise. Let me tell you what the proper compromise is.
But hold on, let's just address the facts of this case just for a second. If they were applying for asylum, then why did they rush the border crossing? Is that what asylum application looks like?
Well, not all of them are probably going to meet the standard for asylum, clearly.
But would you say that someone who waves the flag of a foreign country as he rushes your border station is eligible for asylum?
Well, I don't understand why they would be holding their flag when they're running from that country. So that's a good point. But
what if they rush but what if they try and bum rush the border agents? Doesn't that immediately disqualify them?
Well, we both agree that they have no right to bum rush our border, and we have the right to use force, not lethal force, but a non-lethal force to prevent them from coming across. And for those who threw rocks, it was right for our Border Patrol agents to arrest them and even to use tear gas if that's what they needed to do to stop them from coming across.
Then why is everyone, I agree with you. Why is everyone lying about this? Why is the DNC and all the people who work for them, Acosta and all the buffoons you see on television, why are they demanding that we not believe our eyes, that there's no caravan they're telling us, they would never hop the border, you're a racist if you think they're attacking us? Why are they lying to us, do you think?
Well, it's not for me to explain what they're saying. What I want to do is to talk about what is a sensible solution to this, which is the compromise that was reached in October between the U.S., Mexico, and UNHCR, which is the UN Refugee Agency, which is these people stay in Mexico. They are given housing, they can stay there, and they are allowed to apply for political asylum in the U.S. while in Mexico. And during that time, they will will be processed legally, and their rights will be adjudicated via our process. And if they don't meet the standard, they can't come in. And many of them, in the meantime, will likely find jobs in Mexico or go home. And that's already happened.
Look, but what I find so striking, and look, I just want to be really clear, as I have been many times, I have total sympathy for someone who wants to come here. I'm glad to be a citizen, okay? And I understand why they want to be. But what about our interests? Like, how many people can we absorb? Because no one's even pretending this is going to make us a better, richer country. Like, that's a lie, and everyone knows it. It's going to make us poorer, obviously accepting a lot of poor people when automation is making our own jobs go away. So how many people can we accept before this country really changes for the world? Seriously, it's a serious question.
Well, I mean, why is nobody asking that question? We have different views of where America is. You paint America to be this feeble state that can barely deal with a couple thousand people who want to be processed for political stuff. I think we are still the wealthiest, strongest country in the world.
But is it good
and we
for
also
us?
we also have
for
accepted
us?
many immigrants.
Okay.
Everyone here, unless you're Native American, you are an immigrant.
No, but you're giving
doesn't matter
me a
how far you go back.
So you're appealing to the
let me answer.
No, a real answer. Like, what's the number? So we've got 320 million people. I've got a bunch of kids. I plan to die in this country, and I kind of want to know what it's going to look like, and I want a voice in that. So what can I expect? How many more people do we let in before it's enough?
Well, we're letting in far fewer this year and last year than we did before.
But what's a good number? What should I look forward to?
And we have an immigration problem, which is we have too many people here who are here unlawfully. We need to deal with that problem. But we can't completely cut off immigration. We have to have sensible immigration. We have to protect our border, but not close our border.
I know what the bumper stickers are. I just want to know. I want someone to tell me 50 years from now, here's what America will look like.
Well, but
no one wants to have that conversation because
debate.
You know why?
That debate, it's nice to have that debate here, but that debate needs to take place in Congress.
I don't hear
Congress
it anywhere.
has to pass an immigration law that makes these decisions. It sets numbers and it decides
Let's have a real conversation.
How many people we're going to let in and from what countries.
Because no one else is doing it. I want it on this show. This is the only show that actually has that conversation, and no one will engage with me.
I'm engaging with you.
Thank you, David. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Brandon Judd is president.